Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, July 24th, 2025, and today we are starting a business from scratch. We're asking if corn is a heavy feeder and to terrace or not to terrace. That's a fun lineup, so let's do it. All right. Well, super Thursday to you all. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope everyone enjoyed the live show that we did yesterday. Something a little different. It was fun to break up the daily format a little bit. I did not get basically anything done yesterday beyond getting the live show done and then the basil harvested. The headache I mentioned during the show came roaring back afterwards. So I took a bit of a rest day to rehydrate and get ready for a better day today and tomorrow, hopefully. Anyway, as is tradition of sorts on Thursdays, today we are going to take 3 Patreon questions to continue getting caught back up over there. So today's first Patreon question comes to us from Brian Green, who writes, quote, "Here is a topic suggestion: farm taxes and tax exempt and registering your farm with your state and local USDA office. Basically, how do I make my farm a farm in the eyes of the government? I'm currently navigating that, and even a short checklist of things to do would be immensely helpful. Might be an opportunity for a knowledgeable guest to address," end quote. All right, awesome and nerdy stuff here as well as important. Thank you. And I definitely agree that it would be a good topic to have a knowledgeable guest address at some point, especially as it pertains to farmer taxes, which the Schedule F is a whole thing. And we can do that at some point. But for now, I'll give you what I know, and then we can go from there and others can flesh out what I miss in the comment section, because I'll probably miss some things. First on your checklist is that you have to choose a structure: sole proprietorship, dual proprietor, LLC, co-op, whatever. This can be changed later, but obviously it would be preferred to get it right the first time, so you don't have to go through all of that later. The structure will determine how you can do your taxes, but also your liability, among several other things. Most farm businesses will start out as an LLC, that's a limited liability corporation, or a sole proprietorship. Those are generally the two. Of those, I'm going to generally recommend an LLC because in an LLC, the business is the legal entity, and that means you are less liable for and vulnerable to lawsuit and any debt that belongs to the business, in a nutshell. Like, no one can sue you and take your farm as an LLC. That's a nice benefit of it. Cooperative farms are another thing altogether, on which we will do a whole episode, or 10, because I think, to me, those are going to be the most important farm entities of the future as we lose more and more access to farmland through urbanization and just, wealthy people gobbling it up for, wealthy things. You will also need a farm name, and you will have to register those farm names with your Secretary of State here in the U.S. at least. Once you've registered your business with the Secretary of State, you'll want to get your EIN number from the IRS. You will also want to start a business account with your bank separate from your own account, both for accounting purposes and oopsie avoidance. It's not technically illegal in most cases to just use your own bank account, but having a business account makes taxes and accounting stuff simpler, and it also just helps to have those things separated in your brain. Now, you may also want to get your farm number from the local county extension office, and specifically the FSA. This requires you to have proof of land ownership or control of the land, but the farm number will open up doors to potential grants, conservation funds, that sort of stuff. It also means you will be included in the ag census, which, it's not always the farmer's most favorite thing to fill that thing out, but it does help us get an idea of what is being grown, how much, by whom, age, sex, location, all those things. And then that determines where the USDA puts their energy, and so on and so on. And that's pretty much what you have to do. Once you get into marketing and that sort of stuff, there may be some food safety regulations to think about, like FSMA or GAP certification, but a lot of that will depend on the market that you chose and the volume you intend to produce. That is not a high priority right off the bat. On taxes, one tip with the Schedule F is to go look at all the things they ask for in terms of deductions and expenses and revenue, and use those to guide your farm budget. In other words, use the Schedule F to determine how you keep track of your budget items. Like, for instance, for expenses, they have like fuel, fertilizers, freight, and trucking, that sort of stuff. So as you spend money on those things, just put them immediately into those categories on a spreadsheet. So when you go to fill out that Schedule F, boom, it's all there and you're good. And it's fast and easy. Otherwise, there may be nuances that come up based on where you are. And we have discussed farm insurance, for instance, in other episodes, but that will at least get you started. Obviously, this was mostly for Americans, but feel free in the comment section to outline how that would differ from what you would have to do in your country, state, or region. I'm sure I missed something important there, but it's really just like starting any other small business. Follow those steps, get a couple farm business books, and go from there. All right, I think we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, to terrace or not to terrace, that is literally the question. BRB. No coffee today. I'm hydrating. Actually, I drank coffee earlier. I'm lying. A little update on our teff watermelon combo. The teff is coming back up. As you can see, watermelons look good. I put a little compost around them. I'm going to have to mow this teff, but it was fun while it lasted. Very pretty. Oh, and also while we're on the subject of teff, I mentioned yesterday how I was using teff below some okra right here. These are peppers, living pathway, and then sunflowers in teff, just kind of as a little trial. But isn't it pretty? If you're watching on YouTube, but like, isn't it pretty? Kind of rules. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe. But what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's second Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Martin Komaru, who asks, quote, "My garden is southern facing and has a natural slope from east to west on moraine clay soil, so it slopes sideways. I'm currently working out the long-term plan for the land, and I remember you mentioned that if someone has the capital, grading the land and smoothing it out is a good idea. I'm planning on a heavy focus on fruit trees and berry production, and I was wondering, in this case, if you would still recommend grading the land. As far as I am aware, a slope can be beneficial for fruit trees and such, as it decreases the risk of root rot and such from overexposure to water, especially on soil like mine, even though I will be amending it heavily with compost. What do you think?" End quote. All right, thanks, Martin. Great question here. Effectively, if you are not planning on having gardens there, do you need to grade and or level or terrace the soil at all? Okay, so some of that will depend on what your climate is like, and some of it will depend on your economic goals. You mentioned berries, for instance. These can be quite thirsty, depending on the berry, and labor intensive. So if you want berries to be a significant part of your production, you need to think about both managing water to reduce the need for irrigation, which terracing can do, but also for the ease of harvest. Like standing on a slope for hours on end harvesting berries could be pretty difficult. Ultimately, physically. Remember, like I always say, design your farm like you are less able now, so when you are less able, you can still farm. Moreover, if you plan to use any sort of machinery, a tractor, a cherry picker, but even a golf cart to help you haul out the crop, a slope is going to complicate that work, potentially making it dangerous. Now, that wouldn't mean you have to terrace every area where you plant trees, but you may want a road going through and providing a convenient means to get in and out of the orchards with heavy loads. One thing that might be helpful too, depending on what you're hoping to grow, is to look to regions with similar slopes and how they have designed their orchards or groves. Like I know a lot of Italian olive production happens on slopes, and there may be some good insight to be gleaned from their orchard or grove designs in terms of productivity. Now, if you were wanting just a few trees and a handful of berry plants, then obviously terracing with big machinery would probably not be a great use of startup capital. But if you plan to grow into a bigger production and you really want to make it profitable, then take the design part very seriously. The more time you can spend planning out production, the more time it will save you when you actually go to harvest. Now, as for root rot and that sort of thing, it's certainly possible with clay soils like that in wetter regions. Some of that risk will come down to the crops that you choose. Regionally adapted plants would be preferred, and some of it will simply come down to how the terracing was carried out. Also, and I'm sure you know this, but you also mentioned compost with many of the fruit species. It's easy to over-fertilize them, especially like at the planting time. Like you don't want to really put anything in the planting hole. They really don't need anything but the native soil, at least nutritionally balanced soil. Then use cover crops and surface applications to help enrich the soil around them. I am not the best and most experienced perennial fruit grower yet because my citrus grove must be lost in the mail, which is fine. It's fine. I'm not complaining about it. But my advice is ultimately to get your long-term goals lined out, then decide if some or any amount of terracing will reduce stress and time in the future, or physical labor, or if it could come in handy to help preserve water for certain crops. Looking at you, blueberries. Anyway, Others can feel free to chime in and put their 2 cents in the comments section. I love that a big part of what we do here on this show, because no one person has all the answers, is to aggregate the information. So aggregate away, friends. And we will look back over it tomorrow for Feedback Friday. Up next, we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, is corn actually a heavy feeder? Be right back.
Mojave Desert Garden, Southern California, Zone 9A. Very difficult to grow things here, as you can see. This is first year with a little bit of compost added to the bottom of each one.
Hey, Farmer Jesse. We're on a new homestead here in mountains of West Virginia, and here's one of our first harvests. Lots of cucumbers, a few cabbages, some cut flowers and herbs, and peppers. And the rain has blessed us with lots of mushrooms.
All right, our last Patreon question of the day comes to us from Dan Gorman, who writes, quote, "Hey, Jesse, thank you so much for the time and effort you put into your show. It's rare to find such well-researched growing information. In that vein, a suggestion for a topic and question along those lines, dispelling garden myths. I remember from one of your shows / podcast, you got to the bottom of trimming onions and found the original reason why onion growers were doing this. Another I've been thinking about is corn as a heavy feeder. You hear this kind of passed around, but it seems to miss potential benefits of a deep-rooted crop which stays in the ground for 3 to 4 months. Surely, corn does more than just heavy feeding. How do you view that crop from an ecological farming perspective rather than conventional ag perspective?" End quote. All right, Dan, super fun question here. Thank you. So on the garden myth busting front, I try not to overdo that. There's a ton of sort of like pop science or contrarianism for the sake of contrarianism out there, which is a phrase I don't think I definitely could not have said when I was drinking. And I don't want to contribute too much to that. If I bust a myth, so to speak, it's usually something like the onion example, where I'm looking not just at the studies, but through the history and realizing that somewhere along the lines, a gardener must have seen a large, scale grower trimming their onions and thought, aha, that's how they get bigger bulbs. Then it spread like wildfire on unmanaged lands, when the reality is that those farmers who trim their onions are just trying to speed up the planting process, and in fact are sacrificing some of their yields in the process, which they have calculated is worth it when compared to the labor savings. I've run into a few things like that, but mostly I just try to ask simple questions and see where they lead me. Usually they lead me to a more nuanced view of whatever the quote unquote myth is, but every once in a while you run into something fun like the onion trimming thing. Corn, well, I can't do too much on the myth busting front, but I can give some important context. The reason that corn is considered a heavy feeder is that compared to other crops, it has a higher, than average nutrient demand, especially for nitrogen. Turning a grass seed into a giant ear of corn through thousands of years of intelligent traditional plant breeding will do that to a plant, I suppose. Ditto tomatoes and peppers and Brussels sprouts, etc. So for the best ears of corn, the soil must be fairly rich, and once the ears are harvested, even mowing the corn stalks, you are only returning a small percentage of what you harvested. And for that reason, indigenous North and Central Americans would replenish those areas where they grew corn, often by fallowing for a few years, creating a crop rotation to reinvigorate that soil. That definitely does not mean the corn isn't also benefiting the soil as it grows. Anytime you have a growing plant, you have microbes being fed, carbon being shoved into the soil in various forms. You have effectively benefits. Moreover, since you asked about the ecology, bees and other insects absolutely go bananas for corn pollen. Birds use the corn as landing sticks. I've mentioned a few times the Milpa trial I am running with corn, beans, squash, and sunflowers, so that I have some better insight on these practices. And having the birds and beneficial bugs in the bean flowers in these makes me feel pretty good about the potential insect protection as well. The corn also diffuses the light down into the canopy, theoretically helping the squash and beans, etc., to be able to more efficiently photosynthesize by bouncing the light down to the lower leaves, which creates a nice little microclimate there as well. Plus the squash, in return, shades the soil to help preserve moisture. There is this view of corn as a purely negative drain on our soil and health because, like Dan suggests, this view comes from conventional farming. But corn is truly an incredible plant, an achievement that can benefit soil and people and ecology in many ways, and did and has for thousands of years in North America. Where we go wrong with corn is solely growing corn. Is monocultures. Corn can be grown alone with some encouragement, but corn was definitely not bred to just be a solo plant. It was bred with sisters, squash and beans, but also various other crops like sunflowers, amaranth, and so on. Conventional farmers don't grow it in any sort of interplants because of the complexity of harvests involved, but not because corn wouldn't do better health-wise to be grown in a more complex system. In that situation, corn is a heavy feeder because it's the only feeder and it's only feeding, not giving anything to any other crop. One of the interesting things you see, though, when you look at milpa, Three Sisters style farming, is that it is a little hard to get a good read on how productive it could be due to the myriad of factors. The conditions that the farmers are having to implement these practices have significantly changed. One, labor has moved to the city, so there are fewer people to help plant, cultivate, and harvest. Two, land endowments have shrunk, so farmers have less and less land to access to plant, so the fallow periods are becoming shorter, thus reducing yields. And three, the types of lands they have access to are also becoming hillier and less desirable because the flatter, more fertile lands are being favored from more farming with specialized machinery, and of course urbanization and building manufacturing plants and farmland and all that stuff. So in some ways, we don't really know what these polyculture milpa systems could do. I mean, beyond the massive amount of history of these milpa gardens feeding millions of indigenous Americans, we don't really know in the modern context what these milpa systems are capable of, because the people who know how to properly employ them continue to lose access to the land and the ability to carry out these methods in traditional ways. Wealth and power. Those are honestly the heaviest feeders. Anyway, don't forget No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Share it in a Facebook group. Doesn't really matter which one. You could share it on knitting, breakdancing. There are lots of soccer fans. Love this show. Anyway, enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. I lied about that one yesterday. Pick up a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, or a hat at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of July, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Nikos Siropoulos. I'm going to guess it's Greek. Could be something else. I don't know. All right, so as you will remember, our farmer consultants are cruising into a forest with a mysterious client when suddenly a unique smell hits their noses. It's not a bad smell. It's like rich, almost overwhelming, floral and green and clean, but like unctuous with hints of wood smoke. And as they get deeper into the woods, the air just that smell grows and the air feels cool and damp and bugs buzz all around them. The farmers start to see trees and plants and wildflowers and birds they've never seen. They can see straight through the forest as well, several hundred yards in every direction. It's both abundant and just like open. They even see some elk grazing deep in the woods who seem to not care about the golf cart cruising through. Then they see an opening ahead, and when they reach it, they are met with a vast village of people with small makeshift houses, tending fires, weaving, working, playing, hundreds and hundreds of people surrounded by woods on one side and acres of gardens on the other. It feels like they've traveled through time. Did they? That is for tomorrow on the farm stay. Again, sorry, I like that. I like that title. I feel like that one works. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow. Bye.